Today's reading is taken from the book of Luke, chapter 24, verses 1 through 12. But on the first day of the week, at early dawn, they went to the tomb, taking the spices that they had prepared. They found the stone rolled away from the tomb, but when they went in, they did not find the body. While they were perplexed about this, suddenly two men in dazzling clothes stood beside them. The women were terrified and bowed their faces to the ground. But the men said to them, "Why do you look for the living among the dead? He is not here, but has risen. Remember how he told you while he was still in Galilee that the Son of Man must be handed over to the hands of sinners and be crucified, and on the third day rise again." Then they remembered his words. And returning from the tomb, they told all this to the 11 and to all the rest. Now it was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary the mother of James, and the other women with them who told this to the apostles. But these words seemed to them an idle tale, and they did not believe them. But Peter got up and ran to the tomb. Stooping and looking in, he saw the linen cloths by themselves. Then he went home, amazed at what had happened. May the Lord add a blessing to the reading of the word.
Well, I think we've already heard quite a few sermons today. You get another one. But thank you so much for setting the stage for us for this Easter Sunday in music. And in spoken word, Donna, thank you so much for getting us to this place. So during this Lenten season, over the past 40 plus days, we here at Metro have been exploring the God of the messy middles, the God who meets us in the in-between places. See, the challenge has been to resist the constant tendency toward extremes and dualities that at best just don't fit our lived realities, or at worst can be used to sow discord and disunity within God's creation, harm our relationship with God and with each other. During this Lenten journey through the Gospel of Luke, we have explored the blurry lines between stranger and neighbor, the complexities of faith and works, the layers of being both lost and found, the spectrum of righteousness, but also mercy. And most recently, on Palm Sunday, the ways that silence and shouting can be both creative and destructive. And as we gather here this morning at the threshold of an empty tomb, we find ourselves once again in a messy middle, in the liminal space between grief and hope. Consider the scene. On the first day, there were women. Thank you, Stephen. If anybody needs to hear that again, on the first day, there were women. And they had been with Jesus for the long haul. They had absorbed his teachings and witnessed his healings, and they had watched his torturous death, remaining at a safe distance until they could follow him to his tomb. And in the wake of death, they do what their faith teaches them to do. They prepare spices and oil. They plan to anoint the body. But when dawn breaks, they arrive at the tomb steeped in grief. And upon their arrival, the women find the stone rolled away from the tomb. Now, in order for us to grasp the full gravity, pun intended, of this moment, we would have to actually suspend our 2,000 plus year old internalized Christian orthodoxy, which is probably impossible. See, for us, the open tomb and rolled away stone is cause for celebration and alleluias because we know the whole story. But the position of the stone was not necessarily good news to the women. You see, tombs would sometimes hold valuable objects that were buried with the corpse. And the nails used in crucifixions were actually considered to have magical powers. So it would have been logical for the women to surmise upon seeing the rolled stone and the missing body that this grave had been robbed. And if so, then this would have been grief upon grief, loss upon loss for these women who love Jesus so much. Many in the world today, many in this room and on this Zoom know what this kind of stacked grief feels like. Loss that is layered and compounded. It has been a difficult and challenging year in the life of our wider metro community, with the loss of so many loved ones, parents and grandparents, children, beloved church members, siblings, best friends. There have been heavy and scary diagnoses in our midst. Caregiving needs that require so much of us physically, mentally, and emotionally. There have been challenging school transitions for our young people, and loss of jobs and financial security for others. We here at Metro have opened our doors daily to individuals who have traversed long, treacherous journeys seeking refuge from oppression and violence and are now being targeted and terrorized by ICE and Homeland Security. We have opened our doors to queer and trans youth who fear for their safety as policies are enacted that strip them of rights and seek to make them invisible. We have opened our doors to families trying to put enough food on their tables and mothers trying to escape domestic violence. And this individual grief and trauma is stacked upon the communal grief and trauma that is all around us as fascism is on the rise, genocidal wars rage, mass shootings persist, and white supremacy grows. Okay, I know it's Easter Sunday. And maybe this isn't what you came to hear about. But before you run me out of here, let me say that part of the good news of today is that we don't have to check our pain and grief at the door. We don't. We don't have to check it before we enter this Easter experience. The women didn't. The women at the tomb did not. And if we are honest, this is precisely the time for Easter, for resurrection, when death and grief and loss and pain are stacked, are heavy upon us. In fact, we might be doing a disservice to the point and power of Easter if we pretend that our pain does not exist, if we attempt to avoid death, or if we sweep our grief under the rug before we show up. The Reverend Jeff Chu says that the Christian story is not one of immortality. It is a story of resurrection. Let us sit with that for a second. The Christian story is not one of immortality, of escaping death. It is a story of resurrection, of overcoming death. You see, we are not meant to avoid pain, struggle, or even death. But let me be clear, resurrection is not an invitation to inflict pain, struggle, or death. But when we are inevitably faced with loss, whether in big ways or small ways, that loss can have meaning for us. And death can actually have a word for us. It can teach us about ourselves and our communities and our systems and one another. It can move us to empathy and justice. Acknowledging our pain through grief and lament can help us to perceive the grace that threads through our lives and that are often the seeds from which hope can grow. In the framework of Easter, grief, therefore, is liminal, transitional. It is not terminal. Death has a word for us, but is not the last word. For the women, their journey from grief to hope was through remembering. Then they remembered his words, Luke says, of the women who brought the burial spices to Jesus' tomb. It took outside help in the form of two sparkling angels, and it wasn't immediate. First there was terror and fear, but then they received the gentle word, remember. And they did. They recalled who Jesus was and how Jesus lived and how Jesus healed and liberated, and to the kind of life that Jesus called them to live as well. They remembered and recalled these things. And when they remembered these things, resurrection made sense. It suddenly made sense, even though they had not yet seen Jesus himself or resurrection manifested yet. Remembering sparked just enough hope in them. Perhaps memory is key to our own hope as well. Remembering is core to one of our most common Christian rituals, communion, Eucharist, Lord's Supper, depending on which tradition you come from. We eat and drink, and as we do so what? In remembrance of Emmanuel, the God who is with us yesterday, today, and always. When we are unsure of the journey ahead, when we wonder how we will make it through, we find hope when we remember where God has already led us and the ways that God's Spirit has sustained us. We remember the many stories of liberation, deliverance, and new life that comes from dry bones. Remembering can lead us to hope. And so can testimony. Our text today says that after returning from the tomb, the women testified to what they had seen and heard and what they had remembered. And while it took most of the disciples longer to internalize this news, the spark of the women's story gave Peter just enough hope to get up, run to the tomb, and seek more for himself. We are a communal people, and sharing our stories can encourage one another, can remind us that we are not alone, and give us glimpses of hope that we may not be able to access on our own. Also, protest is a form of testimony. Speaking truth to power and resisting are forms of testimony employed by Jesus himself. This kind of testimony can be riskier than remembering, I have to warn you, especially in this day and age. But if we believe in resurrection, or even if we want to believe in resurrection, then we must be willing to testify, to share the good news of God's love and liberation, not just for us, but for everyone, even if it offends. And remember, the testimony we share, it doesn't have to be perfect or complete or delivered even with full assurance. The women and the disciples are told that Jesus has risen, but they don't see the risen Jesus himself. What they have is a word, a message. This brings the Easter experience uncomfortably close for us, doesn't it? Because this is precisely what we have, the word of resurrection. Like the women at the empty tomb, I can't tell you exactly what resurrection will look like for you, or when, or how it will come. And for some of us, the idea of resurrection in this very moment may seem like idle talk, because the grief you know is so very heavy. I don't know what resurrection looks like for Kilmar Abrego Garcia and his family, or for Mahmoud Khalil and his loved ones. I don't know what it looks like. For those devastated by war and terror, for those being crushed by empire, white supremacy, for those living with chronic pain or terminal illness, for those buried in depression, reeling from broken relationship or shattered dreams. I don't yet know what resurrection looks like for them. But I do know this. The Easter story is theirs. And it's yours. And it's mine. May the good news of this story be that no matter how you arrive this Easter morning, whether you are steeped in grief, stunned in disbelief, or running in the direction of hope, resurrection is for you. This story is for you. And like Sandy and Sierra and Alan and the Metro Choir, I can tell you that I have seen Jesus, the living and loving Jesus, the resurrected and righteous Jesus, the loose and liberating Jesus, the moving and magnificent Jesus, the raised and resisting Jesus. And I know he's seen me. Have you? If so, then that is the good news we have to remember and share and hold on to and let it drive us. So let us remember together, Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. Let us testify together, Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. Alleluia.